Welcome to Northumberland County Council's Petitions Committee. I'll make it 2 o'clock. Remember, this is televised, so please remember, careful what you say. If you understand that, you know, swearing, no nothing, no any of that. So let's bash straight on, and I'll welcome petitioners and councillors to this meeting. First of all, apologies for absence.
Chair, I have apologies for absence from Councillors Flux and Richard Weemouth. Right.
Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 28th of October, pages 1 to 4. Does anybody want to bring anything up that is in there? I see nobody. Okay, I'll sign those as a true record at the end of the meeting. Any disclosures of members' interests? I see no indications. Right. Okay, report of the Executive Director of Adult Social Care and Children's Services. Number 4, petition. Petition from the Hexham Living Wage Group. Now then, I go straight to Pat Devlin. Is it Pat Devlin? Right, you've got 5 minutes exactly. You can use it or you can, but we'll cut you off.
Okay, thank you. So I'm here with a colleague, Alison Chappell, who's also a member of the group. So Hexham Living Wage Group were motivated to focus on the real living wage for carers after the weekly clap for NHS and care staff during the first lockdown. And we were led or instigated in this by a member of our group who had experience of working in the care sector. And she shared with us her experience, which predated the pandemic, when she was aware of care workers asking to work potentially dangerous hours just to make ends meet, basically. And of course, that would also mean they would miss essential time with their families. So we really welcome your proposals, which we understand went to Cabinet earlier in the month, that as requested in our petition, an increased subsidy to care providers would be offered, conditional on a payment of the real living wage as a minimum remuneration. We recognise that the crisis in the retention and recruitment of care staff has been significant in the development of these proposals. But knowing that this is a crisis of national proportions, it's great to know that Northumberland are leading the way in giving a principled response, which recognises the value of care work through increased remuneration for all over the age of 18 years, based on a cost of living calculation, which is projected to be particularly vital in the coming years with increased costs of living projected, and which also registers the evidence of the accredited real living wage employers, which demonstrates that the payment of the real living wage leads to improved retention of staff, increased motivation and performance levels, and a reduction in absences due to sickness. We realise that there's a legal framework binding the policies and actions of the County Council, but we'd like to think that the Council's procurement policy would now reflect a preference, really, that contractors would be paying as a minimum the real living wage, even if this cannot be made an essential criteria. Your report recognises that our petition demonstrates the level of public support for this approach. In fact, there were signatories when we were collecting signatures who were incredulous that care workers were not already being paid above the real living wage. As you can imagine, it was difficult to collect signatures during the pandemic. The 822 signatures on the petition merely reflect brief time slots in 5 of our villages and towns. But we are convinced from that experience that if circumstances had allowed a wider approach, the level of support would have been overwhelming. So we feel that we've demonstrated our ability to be a channel of communication with both members of the public, care providers and care workers. And so we are asking for an ongoing role in this process for our living wage group, particularly as part of the review process which is being proposed at the end of the first year and potentially subsequent years. And I thank you for taking the time to hear us out.
Thank you. So you're happy with the response from the council? I'm going to go over to Neil Snow. Do you want to come in? And then I'll go to councillors if they want to say anything.
Thank you, Chair. No, I think Pat's articulated very well the position and where we're at the minute. I mean, by coincidence, we were already considering this issue as officers and with the lead member for adult social care at the point that the petition arrived. We are suffering extreme difficulties in recruitment and retention. It was particularly in home care at the point that the petition arrived, but that has manifested itself in other care areas. And we were very pleased as well that the Cabinet made the decision that it did make two weeks ago. We would just point out to the committee that this still needs to be ratified at full council as a budget decision. And this committee may want to consider making a recommendation to full council in relation to that. And the only other point I would make is that we would just draw the petitioner's attention to one of the conclusions that they arrived at, which was that higher fees in other areas had led to higher wages. As officers, we haven't seen evidence of that, which is why we pushed Cabinet towards option C in the options that were put forward, where we contractually tie providers into paying the additional amount to the gap in the real living wage in order to receive the additional premium that we put into their fees. We're not convinced in other local authorities that higher fee rates have led to higher wages for carers, but that's for other local authorities to pick up and consider themselves.
Actually, I think we had framed the wording of the petition to link the conditional, yeah.
Right, so where do we go from here? If you're happy with the approach, I mean, these minutes will be going to full council, etc. Or, you know, Nicola, where do they go? They go to the Cabinet?
I think they do go to council.
They go and to council. So the decision has been made for your request. Are you satisfied that we proceed with that?
We are. I think there are just 2 points that we've perhaps made slightly more specific than that are in the report, which is just the confirmation that the real living wage is normally paid to all employees over the age of 18. And the other one is that you would recognise the role that our group has had to date and that we would be included in the review process in a year's time.
Neil?
Yeah, on the first point, I mean, it was explicitly in the petition that you asked for carers to be paid the real living wage, but as we pointed out in the report to Cabinet, we are looking at the wider spread of employees within care services in doing that, and officers are still reviewing that position and the affordability of that. In terms of for future years in review, we have absolutely no problem in coming to you and having some consultation and engagement on that going forward.
Thank you.
We do have Councillor Wendy Patterson, who is the lead member on that. I don't know if you want to speak before we open the floor or we move on. Wendy?
I would just like to say to the petitioners, as someone who visited an elderly relative for many years in a care home, I could see for myself just how hard those staff work. And so we're very supportive. Northumberland County Council are supportive, very much so, of the real living wage. Thank you.
Okay, any member wanting to speak? Councillor Swinburne.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just thank both the petitioner for bringing this to our attention and the officers for the work that they've done on this. I mean, obviously this, it's essential that the service that these people provide, we can't do without it. And I'm really pleased that the decision that's been arrived at with this. So a couple of things. Firstly, we've got 3 options in front of us, A, B and C. We don't often see 3 options available, and I'm really pleased that this is presented in this way. Normally when a report comes to any committee, there's a recommendation, and I would really like to ask if for all committees we get more of this type brought forward, a different type of scenario, like what would happen if this, what would happen if that, what would happen with the other, with the recommendation rather than just one being put forward in front of members. It does give us at least an insight as to what the alternatives are and what would happen. So it's not just for this committee, but for all other committees. It would be really insightful to see the thought process behind how they've reached the recommendation. But one thing I wanted to ask is, on the implications arising out of the report, under finance and value for money, it says, if all providers took up the offer, and our expectation is that some might not do so, what happens to those who might not do so? Where do we stand with that, please? Thank you.
Yeah, yes, obviously these organisations all operate as private businesses or voluntary organisations, and we can't compel them to pay the real living wage. They are entitled within statutory rules to pay whatever wages they want. What they would not attract the premium to their fee if they decided to not pay the real living wage. The reason that we put that paragraph in there as a bit of a warning is just to remember that some of these companies are national or regional companies, and because not all local authorities are following the route that we're going down at this point in time, it could be uncomfortable for some providers to have differential pay rates for staff between local authorities who actually might work in quite close proximity, and could even move between, for example, care homes bounding one local authority to another. So it will be a decision for individual organisations to make, and that's just a little bit of a warning about that. It was also in the context that for charging purposes, anybody that's liable to pay the full cost of their fees, you could end up paying two different fee rates for a very similar quality of care, because one provider may have accepted the premium and be paying the real living wage to their staff, whereas another provider may not be and operating on a lower fee rate. And that would be potentially a difficult scenario for some people, whether, as I say, in a care home of comparable quality, comparable standard, but the fee's higher in one than the other because of this premium that we're adding to pay the real living wage. So it was just pointing out some of the potential annoyances and difficulties that can come out of a policy like this.
Thank you, and I think it's important to point that out, that for clarity, and this progresses through full council, we potentially made the agreement, to increase that, but we can't force, the individuals to take that on board because of their individual policy. So whilst, the offer, shall we say, is there, if because of their individual policy, national policy or whatever, they maintain that lower rate, for want of a better term, it's not our fault. We are trying to do this, but their own policy might override that. So I just needed to clarify that. Thank you.
Caroline? Councillor Ball?
Yeah, for me, fully support it. Ultimately, the carers that work within the county of Northumberland, they've carried a lot of services during this pandemic and prior to that as well, and work their absolute socks off for pittance in many cases. So I fully support that they get the living wage. But what I also support is that Northumberland County Council, we have a lot of clout. So make sure that the procurement procedure is fit for purpose, and that the people that are actually delivering this service to our mums, grandparents, actually get what they deserve and get looked after by the people that we're asking to provide the services. So use the clout that we have to make sure these people deliver. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wallace?
Thanks, Chair. Chair, I'll be honest, I wasn't going to say anything, and I certainly can't find any fault in anything the last two speakers have said. But in a previous life, many years ago, I worked in care, and I was employed because I was cheaper than anyone else. It's as simple as that. And this is a competitive industry, maybe not during these present moments with COVID and that, and desperate shortage of workers in many fields. But quite simply, if I was used overnight, it was because the company charged the cheapest rate, and that was whether it was in Newcastle, North Tyneside or Northumberland. But can I just clarify something, Chair, which I think is important? To me it is. I know this is from Hexham Living Wage, and I'm sure we are, but we are talking about everyone in Northumberland, aren't we? Every employee, and not just Hexham. I would hate to think people in South East Northumberland were not going to be on a par.
Yes, just to confirm, it is right across Northumberland and across all care services as well.
Councillor Sesworth?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much, ladies, for the presentation, which I'm more than happy to support. My mum too was in care for slightly over 3 years in Hexham at Lowgate, and so I've seen firsthand superb work all these people do, especially, although it was too late for me, or too early, depending which way you look at it, but the last 2 years, with the difficulties that have been faced with this present pandemic, would have made it a lot worse, obviously. I understand what you're saying about the national operators, and especially when it's cross boundaries and things like that. And I can see that could be a difficulty, but I think we've got to think away from that, and we've got to do what's right. And I think, you know, some of these national operators may find it beneficial, actually, to level their pay rises and not have two-tier pay rises through different counties, because they will, after all, want to maintain good quality staff. So hopefully that will be the case.
Right, I see no further speakers. Are we happy with the recommendations and the action that is being taken? Everybody agreement? Thank you, ladies. Right, item number 5, I think. 5, report of the Service Director, Local Services. 5, a petition. Petition community campaign to amend the use of the Military Road B6318 junction of A68 to heading on the wall. Now I'm going to go to the petitioner, who is Andrew Clayton. Is that correct?
Thank you very much.
You've got 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Dear Committee, thank you for taking the time to review our petition in regards to the Military Road B6318. As a highlight, we have 2 main issues. Our primary concern is the safety of our community and the different road users. We also need to pay particular attention to the visitors of our great county as the lifeline they create to so many businesses along the wall. In 2019, Northumberland tourism generated approximately £1 billion. Many businesses are thriving during tough economic times due to this cash injection. And of course, no visit to Northumberland is complete without a visit to Hadrian's Wall. Over 7,000 people completed the pilgrimage last year, an additional 30,000 walking the central wall section, journeying along the Military Road. This number is expected to double during the Hadrian's Wall Festival this year. We are delighted tourists have supported our petition as well, but just 2 quotes are, "I would never do this walk again based on the trucks," and "What's it like living on a TT circuit?" On top of the individual safety concerns raised in the petition, is this the image we want to portray to visitors if there is a stronger alternative route which only takes 1 minute longer to complete? Surely we should be encouraging traffic to use A routes where possible, which can promote more visitors to the county and enable our communities to live a happier and healthier lifestyle. A quick summary of our reply to the Council report in connection with road safety. Thank you for organising the 2 Hoots, Robin Hood and Heading on the Wall surveys. This is close to our hearts as 2 Hollow Hill residents incurred life-threatening injuries in June 2001 and are still receiving additional care today. The accident is not showing within the accident summary within the report, which leaves us to concerns over the accuracy of the accident data shared. Hollow Hill. Please view our reply to the Council's report, including video footage of HGVs crossing double white lines and email from Northumberland County Council themselves confirming the area is dangerous. As the village is now 20+ residents, and in regards to the DFT circular, it should now be classed as a 30-mile-an-hour limit. Halton Shields. The road survey has already been completed in December, but local residents are awaiting the results. There is also some concerns that December isn't a true reflection of the year based on the freezing conditions, but more information again is shown in our reply. The second issue is on the HGV use of the road. Just to reiterate, the road is used as a shortcut to save 1 minute from a safer and already advised A68 and A69 journey for HGVs. A route which is also more fuel efficient and less disturbing to the local community. I'm wondering, does the committee really understand the volume of HGVs currently using this B road? Barristwood Quarry alone has planning permission for 300 trucks per day, 290 days a year. Taking into account the to and from journeys, that's 174,000 HGV trips operating 24 hours a day. That's 1 HGV every 2.4 minutes. Can you imagine for a moment trying to get to sleep at 1 o'clock in the morning with HGVs racing less than 3 metres away from your door with the noise well above the maximum limits shown on HSE? Question to the report. We appreciate the stance in the report on educating hauliers. However, this is already being completed. The issue was raised by Councillor Glenn Sanderson back in 2019/20. After years of complaints to Tarmac, they confirmed that they would stop using the road at night, which was confirmed on the 11th of the 8th, 2021. However, they have done so for many months since. PC Wilkinson from Northumbria Police scheduled a visit to Barrisford Quarry on the 11th of October last year to educate the hauliers. As you can see from the video evidence shared in our reply, this was ignored by Tarmac, who also confirmed their own trucks were speeding through the village on the 14th of the 10th, only a few days after the police visit. Video evidence of both frequency and dangerous driving in just 30 minutes of one evening is also attached to our reply on the report. The hauliers are out of control, and without action, lives and livelihoods are being put at risk. Quarry traffic is 90% of the HGV issue. Please let us take action to save lives, save communities who have helped reinvigorate our local villages and help generate even more returning villages in 2022. Thank you.
Right. I am familiar with the road. We do have the local councillor here as well. I used to live up there and I travel that road quite a bit. I'm surprised you haven't included the Matford junction, because there's been a few crashes there in your submission, because that is a bad, I mean, all those junctions are bad. Right, who's starting off here? Neil?
Yeah, me. Thank you for providing us the information there. Microphone. Oh, sorry. Thank you for your presentation there, Andrew. Yeah, we've obviously done a detailed report on it. We've looked at the accident data. There's 27 person injury collisions in the previous 5 years, which run from the year 68 through to heading on the wall. The police are aware of concerns that they regularly enforce at Harlow Hill. Halton Shields is on their Operation Madero database. We did do a speed survey in December, as you've mentioned, but unfortunately the equipment was damaged. There was actually a hole in one of the tubes, so the information was incomplete. So we'll be carrying that survey out again in the near future, along with the other ones identified. So once we've done these surveys, the intention would be to do some investigatory work at the locations identified to see where signage and road markings can potentially be improved after we've had a look at some of the causation factors of some of these injury accidents. Appreciate there may be more damage-only incidents, and unfortunately we never get to hear about those. Clearly people may have crashed into a hedge or a fence and done off, so there may be more than these 27, but these are the information, these are accident information provided to us from the regional data analyst. In terms of the quarry traffic, from a planning perspective, the quarries they do have to adhere to planning conditions, and I think the intention is to communicate a bit more with those to refresh their memories. I know it's being done with the police, but the intention is to communicate with us a bit more to remind them of how they should be behaving on these roads. And when we do these speed surveys, you can do what's called a classified survey, which tells us the type of vehicles, and so from that we'll be able to tell what speeds the individual HGV traffic is travelling at. So it'll be broken down into vehicle types as well, which will be useful.
Is that it?
That's it. Yeah.
Right, so there's more information to come. I mean, I'll open it up the floor to members. I know that there's people with interest in this. There used to be an awful lot more quarries. Because when I was a lad, there was probably another half dozen. And, I mean, Moot Law was one of the biggest in Europe, and that's mothballed or closed. And there used to be a wagon a minute come out of there. So I don't know what the volume is from back then to now. I think what it'll be is the wagons are bigger. It's probably the biggest thing. Anybody? I've got Councillor Jones, a local member. Do you like to open the button?
If that's okay, yes,
Yeah.
please. All right, thank you. So I'm Councillor Veronica Jones, and I'm the councillor for Ponce West, which includes most of the area we're talking about, not quite the other ends, but it does include. I'm actually here to support the petition. Since I've been the councillor there's been several new homes, small developments or barn conversions at Harlow Hill and at Halton Shields, and recently, though, some larger ones at Harlow Hill itself. They've all been individual ones, so planning may not have been considered, considering the impact of the road onto the properties as they were built. But it does mean that more families are living along the road. The council's done quite a lot over the years in the past for the lorries. We've had a reduced speed limit at Harlow Hill, additional signage and road markings, new traffic calming measures. We've worked with the police, as you know. We are working currently with Historic England on the possibility of an interactive speed indicator, and measures at Halton Shield are in the pipeline at the moment. We also have, the chairman mentioned Matford Piers, which is a really difficult junction. We have done some measures there. There's not so many people live near Matford Piers junction, but that traffic there is used, that junction is used by people from all around the area and tourists as well. So the arguments are valid there as well, that it is really. Because the traffic includes lorries, it does feel really scary as they pass. And, you know, residents just don't feel safe. I've seen myself jump back when a lorry comes through. I appreciate it may be difficult given that it's a major road. It's one of our major roads in the county, and in many places the Hadrian's Wall path is along the same road, and that means, you know, we do have to involve Historic England, but we still need to look at how we protect our residents. So I am asking that we give support to this, the request in this petition.
Councillor Ball?
Just a quick one. Just wondering if there's anything around the planning conditions that can be done, any enforcement with the quarries, or is there any conditions that do relate to this at all?
To answer this, someone's been on planning a long time. It's little bits. It's not like planning in big towns where there's like 500 houses. We'd be lucky if there's 5, 6 or 7, or 1 or 2, and it's probably not the same impact. But collectively, they're starting to gather up is a significant number. Rob, head of planning.
Thank you, Councillor Dodds. Quarry applications, unlike other permanent forms of development, for example houses, do come with operational conditions such as routing agreements, etc. We can review those and see if they need to be clarified with the operator anyway. But it is standard practice to attach routing conditions to minerals applications. Thank you.
Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. Support the report and support the local councillor.
Microphone.
Apologies. Support the report and support the local councillor as well. Just a couple of searching questions. One to the officers around, you know, the fault that was on the speed monitoring or the equipment that was there. Could it be a request that that piece of work gets done and gets done speedily so we can get the report back? The other thing is, as a councillor who's had speed monitoring cameras put into his ward, they're very, very good. They slow the traffic down and make people aware. It just takes a car in front to slow down and go to the correct speed, and it slows about 8 cars behind. So they're really good, and I think Neil Snowden can give us much information about that as well. It's a searching question. It's a quarry. It's lorries.
It's quarries. Quarries,
lorries. Are they on a bonus? Are they trying their best to get the return trip done as quickly as possible? Because that could be one of the significant things if the lorries driving fast.
The petitioner has indicated to speak, but I'm going to go to the councillors. Councillor Sesford and Councillor Riddle.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a lot of sympathy with the petitioner here. I'm County Councillor for Hexham Central with Egham, and we have similar problems and issues with the tree lorries that come rattling through the village. and I'm actually seeing Neil up there next week, hopefully, possibly the week after, as one of the many issues I have to talk about. So I have full sympathy for this. You say that it would save a minute. I mean, we're talking about the speed limit. By reducing the speed limit, it would save no more a minute, was it?
Can I speak for a second? It's
Don't mind,
one minute.
Just
If
a
they,
Go on.
point.
Make it quick, because I really are, I break a rule by letting you speak.
sorry, so it's 1 minute longer to go by the A68 and A69 than
So
it is
was
using the
the
junction.
diversion. Right. It's difficult diverting some lorries and not others. That's one of the problems that you got. Reducing the speed limit would obviously help a lot of your problems, but probably take a little bit longer. I mean, that's why I was just making sure I clarified that. But yes, I mean, I have lots of sympathy. If you see the trees that come into the village of Acomb, they're rattling. You see 3 metres. Some of them are less than 1.5 metres away from the houses. Yeah, I would support anything that could somehow slow these lorries down, or, if possible, of course, divert them, which I notice is one of the proposed actions that you've taken. Well, you say to strengthen existing advisory signage, which all sounds very good, but of course, as somebody said previously, they'll go the fastest way they can because they come pick another load up or whatever, and I don't know whether. It's perfectly timed in a day for them to pick X amount of loads up in that day, and if they go 1 minute longer on each journey, whether that means they lose a load and therefore lose money, I don't know. But that would be something that would be nice to have a look at and see to help. But yeah, you've got my support.
Councillor Riddle, I know you're not on this committee, but I'll allow you to speak.
I am the cabinet member
I know.
for local services, and I was invited by you.
But it's still my permission, so get on with it.
I know this road very well, obviously, like many of you. I mean, it is the road that I travel when I go to Newcastle all the time. So, I am familiar with it. Safety, of course, is paramount. Network. It is a diversion route if something happens on the A69. It's probably quite timely that we look again at the speed limit at Harlow Hill, because there are more residential properties there now it's been developed. I've already asked officers to look at the junction at Matford Piers, because I call that suicide alley. The number of times I drive down there and cars just pull straight out in front of you without looking. And I know there has been a number of accidents there, but at the moment I think it's a give way sign. It needs a stop sign on that road coming out onto the military road. As somebody who used to and who has just given up their HGV licence, I know both sides of this. And actually I would dispute what you're saying about the time, because if you're driving a heavy laden wagon to Stagshire and going down that steep bank to the A69, and then you're climbing back up onto the rise, and you're dropping down to Broxbushes, then you're climbing again, the top road is virtually level. And, it's a straight run, so, I can see both sides of the argument here. But, I do think that it is a road that we need to look at, but I wouldn't support the petition of no HGVs for access only. That would be my position.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. The reason I've got my coat on is I don't know what you lot are like, but I'm freezing. Anyway, so forgive me. All I was going to say was, as far as speeding HGVs is concerned and speeding overall, what the report tells us, what the officers have told us, is that it's not actually, it's more perception than it is actual. Right. And these wagons are going to have tachographs in them, and they're going to be, they're monitored already. So there's probably not a lot more we can do other than shift them from that road, if that's what it appears is necessary. Everybody seems to think there's a problem, which is, probably is. There's a lot of problems everywhere with traffic. So what I would suggest we do, if we're all acknowledged something needs to be done, then rather than it keep coming back here, why don't we just send it to the overview and scrutiny for Neil to report back to them when all of these surveys are done and have a plan go there, and then that can be put into the system quicker than it keep coming back here.
Fair point, I suppose. Any officers want to comment on that? I mean, you're going to have to go away and do a little bit more research and come back with some ideas, or ideas that you see can't happen. Do you want that to go to scrutiny or not?
It could do. It could come back here.
So we'll have a conversation about that in the scrutiny chair, the right scrutiny meeting. Because night will follow day, we'll have other roads that have got similar sort of problems. So I would like to find a home. Councillor Swinburne.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Reid's just raised a very interesting point with regards to tachographs, whether it's actual speeding or perceived speeding. Completely different area, I know, but in the southeast, you know, in Cramlington, we've got a number of 20-mile-an-hour limits, and repeatedly we have an issue with buses speeding in the 20-mile-an-hour town centre. And when you try and report it, well, when you try and raise this issue, you know, we're told, oh well, if you know, give the details of the bus and what time, etc., etc. And I persistently said, you know, these buses themselves have tachos, so where does the responsibility lie? Do we, as a council, you know, have the right to say, well, we want to see the tachos? Do the police, you know, where does the responsibility lie to be able to prove that these vehicles are speeding or not? Because if you were to say to the company, you know, like, well, you check them, I can pretty well sure they'll say, no, everything's within the speed limits. So there is a way of checking for the speeds. You know, I do support the petition for safer speeds, and if it is a case of a minute, you know, if we were to reduce the speed limit on those roads and they were to take the A69, you know, that could well be the alternative. If they find that it's a lower speed limit on this road, they then opt to take the A69 because that's more beneficial and more economical for them. That could well solve the issue. But as Councillor Reid has raised, you know, quite rightly there, all these HGVs do have tachographs. So evidence is available on what speeds these vehicles are doing. But where does
I think that's a police matter.
Check them?
I believe that's a police matter. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair. It would be the police or the traffic commissioner. It's not something that the county council would have.
So that's another question that we've got to ask somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean, I would note in the petitioner's further information that he sent through to us, there was an issue raised about 2 tarmac wagons, and tarmac have looked at that and shown that one of them was going over that speed limit, and that person no longer works for tarmac. So, you know, to be fair to tarmac, in that particular case, they seem to have taken action and looked at it. But it's not something where we can request that information generally, but it is something, you know, I know our planning colleagues do talk to the quarries on a regular basis, and it is something that I think they could work with them more on that as we go forward.
Right. I think we're going to have to await more information coming back on this. As I say, I'm very familiar with the road. If someone wants to ask how long's the road been there, does anybody know? I know. It's 2,000 years coming up. So there's been a road there a lot longer than anything else. However, I think the problem we've got is wagons change, probably wagons are faster, whatever, but they've got so many tachographs and other things that restrict them. However, I was part of when we made the local plan for here. When we as Northumberland make a local plan, we're not setting out, Colin was chairman, we're not setting out quarries and everything for the northeast, for Northumberland. We are setting them out for the whole of the northeast. You know, the quarries don't just feed Northumberland, they feed into other areas. And if anyone wants to come along to a plan meeting where there's a plan application for a quarry, there's always a really long job in doing that. Even coal extraction is a big problem. Councillor Jones, and then I'll try and sum.
Yeah, sorry, it's just something I just thought I'd better mention quickly, and it came up in something you said, Chairman. I just thought we should remind ourselves that Mootlaw Quarry isn't closed, it is only mothballed and does have an operating licence. So at any point in the future, we could be adding Mootlaw traffic.
Well, there's
so
a
we should
few
be aware
more.
of that.
There's a few more quarries that are like that. However, right. I'm going to park this one for more information, the surveys and that coming through. We'll look into going into scrutiny with it, or because I don't want to go into scrutiny on one road. I'd rather that scrutiny looked at this type of problem as a county, because I think there will be other roads. So I'll look into that through what I'd call the chairman's scrutiny group, and we'll see where we can go. Right, so we're going to park this. It looks like you've got support for you, in principle, to have a look at this. I don't think we're going to get support to close the road and stop everything, because there is still local traffic from grain wagons to straw to all different kinds of thing on that road. But predominantly you are talking about quarry wagons. Right, Nicola's pointing out we've got a recommendation. Note the content of the report, acknowledge receipt of the petition and support the proposed actions. Are we happy with that? It will be coming back for more information. Okay, happy? I'll move on. Thank you, sir. Right, item number 6, services. And this is a petition against inappropriate development in Beadnell. And I have Joan Brown. The floor is yours, madam.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair and councillors. I'm a permanent resident in Beadnell. I've lived there for over 16 years. Beadnell is a very close-knit community with only about 300 residents. I decided to start this petition after hearing residents' concerns about planning approvals which were having a detrimental effect on people's lives and the character of the village. I want to emphasise that this petition is not about whinging or NIMBYism, but about serious issues resulting from ill-judged planning decisions which are affecting people's lives. I welcome Mr Murphy's reference to the Council taking matters I raised very seriously and identifying areas where improvements can be made in the planning decision-making process. Reference is also made in the report from Mr Murphy to the Council wishing to produce a Northumberland design guide. But a wish does not mean it's going to happen. The Council needs to commit to this and set a target date for that guide to be produced. Mr Murphy outlines how planning decisions are made, but sometimes in practice this is not happening. For example, in his report, Mr Murphy often refers to the neighbourhood plan, pointing out that the policies in this plan are afforded, and I quote, significant and relevant weight in the determination of planning applications and discussed in the officer's report. Neighbourhood plans are statutory documents, part of the planning law. Yet, the planning report recommending approval for number 4, The Haven, makes no reference whatsoever to the neighbourhood plan. In other words, planning approval has been agreed without consideration being given to our neighbourhood plan. This is clearly wrong. Also, in this same case, the Conservation Officer was not consulted, despite this development being in the conservation area. Planning law requires that specific bodies must be consulted. In all cases referred to in our petition, the AONB and the Parish Council input has been ignored. What is the point of
consultation if it carries no weight? Not enough emphasis, we feel, is placed on local knowledge. If the planners do not give weight to the comments of the Parish Council and the AONB, then at least the planning officers should be assigned specific geographical areas and they get to know these areas, their history and the developmental pressures. We ask that, 1, the neighbourhood plan is included in all planning decisions for Beadnell. 2, the appropriate consultees are always consulted. 3, more weight is given to the comments from the AONB and the Parish Council who have local knowledge. 4, a target date is set for the production and implementation of the Northumberland Design Guide. One final thing. Mr. Murphy's report has been read by a number of the people in the village who signed this petition. They have made relevant comments which they would like brought to Mr. Murphy's attention. I would like to make arrangements to do this. Thank you.
Right,
Thank you.
thank you. You raised a number of things that a lot of people here are familiar with and on the planning committees, etc. Rob, you've been named quite a few times there.
Sorry.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Okay, I'll go through the comments made and how the reports address them. Firstly, I think it's important to set a few guiding principles out here, which members on planning committees will appreciate, but sometimes different elements of the public do not always fully appreciate. Okay, the planning system tries and balances individual rights against community and public and third-party rights. Okay, we cannot seek to alter the balance fundamentally in individual rights to develop your property versus community concerns without a very good cause. And I'll come on to that at the end of my presentation. Okay, I think it's fair to say that it is a common situation where residents feel that applications are made and there's a fait accompli somehow that they're going to be approved despite what they say. It is also absolutely the case that applicants complain to us bitterly sometimes that we seemingly place too much emphasis on parish council comments, neighbour comments and consultee comments. Okay, right, so in terms of the report then, I don't propose to go through the individual cases named because I'm more than happy to meet with the residents and a group of them to talk about those individual cases. I would always point out though that we need to be careful about our use of language here. And when we talk about the views of a parish council being ignored or the views of a resident being ignored, they are not ignored, but sometimes we do not agree with those views, but that's not the same as saying we just ignore them. It may seem to be that the end decision doesn't follow the argument made by those third parties, but we do not, definitely not ignore them. Okay. Right. To work through the report then in terms of the points made. There's some points in here which I have no desire to be combative, but I think we just need to look at what is actually said in the petition. And there's a line in there which I can understand, and it's very much a human nature to say this, but the argument is made that when a resident buys a house, it should be as seen. In other words, that, well, I almost read that as saying that if you buy a house with a backdrop of development around it, somehow you have a right for that to be frozen in place. It is very much the case that communities, all communities, change over time. So it's not about development not having an impact on existing residents, because clearly any form of development is capable of having an impact. It's about harm, and there's a difference between noticing something or not liking something's being built, and actually is there demonstrable harm to either character, locations, privacy, amenity, whatever. Okay, and the planning system tries and balances that. Okay. We also have to think about lots of issues in terms of when we talk about this harm. So it isn't just harm to a neighbouring resident or to community. We also have to look at, well, those issues and look at wider harm, wider benefit, and then issues like climate change have to be factored into the decision, and affordable housing and issues like that. So there needs to be a broader view of how we look at this harm versus benefit balance, rather than just a neighbour not like an individual a proposal. Okay. The petition understands this issue about the harm, but I say my point is that this needs to be looked at objectively, and that there is individual rights as well as public rights in this area. Okay. I'll come back to the issue about the credence given to objections made by the AONB and parish councils. Okay, we do attach significant weight to the views of the AONB and parish councils and neighbourhood plans, and we have refused applications and we have won appeals on the basis of neighbourhood plan policies. Okay, but a neighbourhood plan, it is indeed part of the statutory development plan as the local plan is, but it is not a simple binary yes/no answer. And our own local plan, hopefully when the new version is adopted shortly, does not give you an automatic series of refusals or approvals. So you have to look at both the weight to be given to the policies and whether those policies are relevant in this particular case. Okay. So sometimes a neighbourhood plan will not have a relevant policy in there that affects a particular form of development, in the same way a local plan might only have a certain selection of policies that are relevant. Okay. That also answers the question about the AONB views and the neighbourhood plans views taking a greater priority. I agree that neighbourhood plans deserve to have the full statutory weight and that be recognised in them. However, I'll repeat the fact that we have to look at other issues as well in this. Okay. In terms of who we consult, yes, we always do consult all the relevant statutory consultees and applications, be the public protection team, be that the Environment Agency, the local lead flood authority, etc. We cannot compel them to make comments, and sometimes they may have no concerns about a particular issue. However, where they do make comments, we place significant weight on them, including where a statutory consultee comes out with an outright objection on a fundamental principle that is material. That matter will go to planning committee for a committee-based decision. A point's been made in the petition that the public speaker made this point, that sometimes we don't always consult our internal consultees consistently, for example, the conservation team. It is absolutely the case that we deal with at the moment, of all types, approaching 6,000 planning applications a year now, which, if you do the maths, is one application needs to be determined every 18 minutes. Okay. We consult the conservation team, and we consult the public protection team, and we consult other internal consultees where we need their views. So to manage workloads, we have been empowering case officers to handle more of applications that previously we would have consulted the conservation team if they are in a conservation area. But we will always consult the conservation team where there's a significant development or whether it affects, say, a listed building. Okay. So we have to cut our cloth accordingly, and it is a resource issue in terms of us not consulting every internal consultee on every single application. Okay. Even though we always do consult the statutory prescribed consultees. Okay. The points made as well that in the petition is that where a more junior officer handles an application, say a graduate planner, that should always be reviewed by a more senior officer. That is the case, and I can confirm that we have a two-stage checking approach on all recommendations. Okay. The point's also made that planning guidance is not black and white, but shades of grey, and I agree completely. And part of the art and science of planning is to look at the shades of grey and the weighing up the harm versus balance. I would say, though, it's important not to consider the planning system as a auditing process. So what we don't do is get planning applications in, look at them, and decide whether or not to grant them or not. There's a process of trying to improve the scheme through negotiation to drive out the best design outcomes. And sometimes a scheme that is approved may be the second or third iteration of design changes. Those design changes are driven both by consultee views, by officer experience, and regularly by parish council comments or neighbour comments, say to do with overlooking. So frequently I see the very large number of domestic applications we get where I'll see that the report has shown that things like dormer windows may have been taken out of the design early on because of objections through residents, or a parish council. Another point made is that the planning department should have a list of documents they require when a planning application is submitted. I can confirm that a few weeks ago I took to our executive and our cabinet the new validation list, which is a fully up-to-date list of the information we require. That will be on our website shortly, and when we adopt the local plan, that will be further updated, and it will be focused more heavily on design issues. Finally, for a way forward here, first of all, I'm more than happy to meet any group of residents to talk about planning issues, and I regularly attend parish and town council meetings, either individually or through NALC training sessions. But the way forward here, and the speakers pick this up, that government is now giving us more leverage to secure better quality design in all forms of development. Part of that will be through what's called the National Design Code, which is a set of standard principles. We will have, on the basis of the new local plan, a Northumberland design guide. But I think the best way forward is as well for communities at the parish level to come up with their own design guides, because we can tie refusals and changes to schemes, but it can't be on the basis of a nebulous saying it should be better. We need to say actually what we mean in the local circumstances by good design. And I was just at the parish level in the county. It's probably the best level to do that. We will be doing that work as soon as possible, and we'll be publishing a time scale and inviting participants both through the neighbourhood planning process and through the wider design guide work. So yeah, that's a good point, well made, and we have been talking both to central government and adjoining authorities about how we're best rolling this out in terms of putting some meat on the bones of a revised approach to design.
Are we about done?
That's it.
Right. Okay. Councillor Horncastle, would you like as lead member for planning, etc.? Would you like to speak?
Thanks, Councillor Dodd. Yeah, no. This could be really the views of anywhere in the country, because as long as you've got planning, you've got controversy. But you've got to remember, like Rob's just said, there are two sides to everything, and an applicant has a legal right to put an application in and be heard according to the council's policies. So planning is a very inexact science, really. It's not you get accountancy or something where you've got a group of figures, you can add them up, and it comes up the same figure every time. It's a mix. It's a mix. It's a decision that's brought about by a mix of different policies, views of statutory consultees. So you're never ever going to get a really consistent outcome all the time. it's a very complex way that the decisions are drawn up as well. There's a lot of mention here of the neighbourhood plan. Now, I get to read all the neighbourhood plans that are coming forward in Northumberland, and I've been heavily involved in one of them at the very start of the process. And I obviously read this one a few years ago, and I can't remember if it has actually got a design policy in it. If not, then that's not the end of the world, because that could be addressed with a review of the neighbourhood plan. Like Rob says, a new local plan will eventually have a design guide in it, and all this will be there to help applicants, parish councils, objectors and the officers in coming forward with an acceptable proposal. Now, again, in here, there's a lot of mention of the parish councils. We're not taking any, you hear this all the time, nobody takes any notice of the parish council. Well, the parish councils actually, I hate to say this, but the parish councils are not a body made up of professional planners. And they can obviously be very parochial in their views, and they can often, I'm not saying in this case, but I've seen it so many times, often tainted by personal views and relationships locally. And the AONB and the parish councils are not the decision makers, but their views are part of the bigger picture. So decisions are made by professional officers or by a committee, mostly by delegated decisions. Over 90% of decisions are delegated to officers, but the ones that come to the committees, those decisions are made by a committee that is guided by professional officers with a report. And the committees, by and large, are very experienced, and they're also trained. And there's some planning committees have many hundreds of years' experience on them. Now, getting back to the complaints about this, I've been heavily involved with planning for years. I meet with Rob every week. I meet with other senior officers frequently to talk about any problems, how to smooth things out. And I have absolutely no knowledge of any procedures that have not been carried out properly. And all I can say is that I understand that the petitioners have various views on certain applications that's gone through in Beadnell. But all I can say is, as the portfolio holder for planning, that I have full confidence in the Northumberland County Council planning system, its officers and its various planning committees. So going back to the recommendations, yeah, I agree, I endorse the recommendations. But what I will go back to say is that it is always going to be, planning is always going to be controversial. We've all been touched by planning applications in our areas and our parishes by our neighbours, and there's always winners and losers. Every planning application, every decision that's made, somebody's happy and somebody's unhappy. So that's about all I can say on this, Richard. Thank you.
Well, to the petitioner, I think both Councillor Horncastle and myself add up to 62 years on a planning committee. We started off with Tyndale many years ago, and I'm sure there's quite a bit down the line, as it were, and it's never easy. I mean, there seems to be a lot of neighbourhood plans coming up or springing up, and where I used to live, there's a one sprang up, and it was to stop a planning application, or 2 planning applications, and all the people that were on it were hell-bent on stopping a planning application. And that's not what a neighbourhood plan is about. A neighbourhood plan is to have some guidance of what you would like to see, how things shape, and the way things shape, and have a say, because often a lot of people's foray into the planning process or the whatever is the only time they've taken an interest. And that'll not be the case, I'm sure. But a lot of people come along to a plan committee and think, what on earth's going on here? How do I change this? And they really have to get upstream. Now then, that's just my view. Anybody? Councillor Wallace?
Thanks, Chair. Chair, when Councillor Horncastle said he thought this could be anywhere in the country, I thought, I'll be honest, he was going to say this could be anywhere on the Northumberland coastline. with the exception of Camas, of course. For the petitioner's information, I chair the Northumberland Association of Parish Councils, and there's 155 of them. And I can assure you, your representative for Beadnell, Sylvia Hillen, refers to what's happening in Beadnell and up the coast with great regularity. It's something we've been in conversation with Rob Murphy on many occasions, and I have to give credit, Chairman, if I may. Rob Murphy has provided, and his team, the most expert and professional training to parish councillors over the past year, and there's a catalogue and a list of training being provided throughout this ensuing year. So, in fact, I'm not saying they'll ever come to 62 years experience, Chair, but I am saying that we will have a much better understanding. And it's important that they do, because the contribution towards the neighbourhood plan from town and parish councils is imperative and paramount, and should be the first thing that's done. There's nothing unique about Beadnell, Chair, except it's now the most desirable place to live in Northumberland, according to recent surveys and recent reports and recent competitions. And that perhaps is a bit of a poison challenge for Beadnell. It's a shame, because I'm sure you have a wonderful life there and you'll be the envy of many Northumbrians. But I have to give praise to the Planning Department of Northumberland County Council, Chair. I've only been on it since May, but I've been coming to Northumberland County planning meetings since 1991. And this is one of the finest services that this council runs. And Councillor Horncastle is correct. You can't please everyone, but I assure the petitioner we go out of our way to please as many as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Right, Councillor Ball.
Yeah, basically we have some of the most beautiful towns and villages in the whole of the UK here in Northumberland, and I'm a great believer that we need to protect them, because a lot of, I know it's not within planning rules, some of the changes, but just because it doesn't fall within the material considerations doesn't mean that it's right for these things to go ahead. And I think we have responsibility as a county and as people on planning to ensure that the characteristics of these towns and villages remain. So I just think we need to have some kind of way, maybe there has to be some kind of review. I know Rob's obviously aware of some of my issues around the planning rules, and I have voiced them before. But I just think the difference between one of these historic towns and villages, these places of interest that people travel from all, it is one of the best places to live. People, it's in all the papers that people are demanding and wanting second homes and pricing people out of being able to live there. We need to be able to protect our towns and villages, because if not, they're going to lose the reason people want to live there and lose their character. Thank you.
Anybody else? I have not one person. If I could draw your attention to a place west of Ponteland, Medburn. Absolute minefield of development and no infrastructure, and no one's prepared to do anything about it. I would suggest anybody go just to have a look. You know, expensive houses, poor roads, but it's all private. Anyway, this is Beadnell. It is a little, you know, we have read about Beadnell and the jewel and the crown, and everybody wants to go there, and that's your problem, isn't it? How do we address a problem like Beadnell when it is such an attractive little place to go to, with a lovely beach and a lovely outlook? And I think it's got the only west-facing East Coast harbour. I mean, I used to go on holidays to Beadnell with a caravan there. So I think we all experience and love that part of the coast, and it really is down to us to try and make things better. But probably in trying to make things better, we may just increase numbers into somewhere, and that's the problem. Because I see in planning coming up next week, those of us that's on planning, we've got a 3 motorhome applications for sites up that area. So it continues. Right, Nicola, Rob, do you want to come back to anything that's been said before I move to
Yeah.
the recommendations?
Yeah. Can I just say this is actually a very timely petition. To speak from the other perspective on this is that the planning profession as a whole has been arguing with central government for more powers to push up better quality design. The recent announcements, or last year, about the Planning for Beauty agenda comes with the explicit message from central government that where design does not meet the standards you would like, you will be empowered to refuse applications. Okay. Designs you do not like, though, isn't just what you think on a particular day. It's got to be based on a really objective position, and that is the design guide. So that's why I do have trouble giving a precise timescale for the design guides, because we need to tie the design guides to the new local plan, and I don't as yet have an adoption date for the new local plan. But as soon as we have that, we will be publicising not just a timetable for producing design guides, but other forms of supplementary guidance as well, including things like tourism, health, climate change, all those areas that we will need to try and balance up to give opportunities to the people of the county and see economic growth, but at the same time, you know, not prejudice that makes this place so special and its qualities. So it will be an interesting time over the next 18 months, but this will allow some real opportunities to tackle this issue. And can I just point out to one of the members that we can't make decisions on the basis of non-material considerations, otherwise we would find ourselves in court. However, what we can do is really explore, because you said it actually there pretty well, you said about character, and establishing what you mean by character is what you do in a design guide. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Right, we've got to move on to these, I can't see anybody else wishing to speak, these recommendations. The Petitions Committee is recommended to note the issues raised in the petition. Is that the same? Yeah, I've got it here, exactly the same. Issues raised in the petition, the explanation of the role of planning and how planning decisions are made, and inherently controversial nature of planning, and the matters of the planning service will be refining, including the new validation list and following the adoption of the new local plan, including the Northumberland design guide. I think the design guide is a key to where we're going with this. I recall Colin was chair. I used to push the design in the working group that did the local plan. I said it's probably one of the best weapons we'd ever get, because let's face it, we look around certain developers, they call every 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, they're all the same, you know, and the one that gets me is that a lot of listed buildings that we have now wouldn't never be allowed to be built. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, I'm all right with those recommendations, Chair, but the petitioner did ask, and the officer did say that he would be quite happy to meet the residents and talk through these planning applications. So could we reflect that in the decision?
I think I'll leave that to Rob Murphy to speak with the petitioner. I mean, I do recall, I mean, another village, Low Newton by the Sea, I canvassed that once, and there was only 12 residents there. The rest was second homers. So, you know,
yeah, but
local knowledge would be a good thing for Rob to find out who lives there.
All I'm saying is that I think the recommendation should reflect the fact that the officer is willing to go and speak.
Can that be noted? I think I don't want to put that in as a recommendation. I just because I would have to go back over. But can that be noted? Well, is everybody happy that that's noted?
So long as the petitioner and Mr. Murphy are happy, then I
think they are. Are you happy with?
Yes.
Yep. Right, Councillor Horncastle.
Yes, just as an aside to this, just to let people in up the coast and the rural areas know that behind the scenes, we're actually doing an awful lot of work on places like Beadle, up the coast, rural areas, to deal with the second home problems, a lack of affordable housing. So, although you specifically talk about these problems today, I just need you to know and take this message back that we are concentrating behind the scenes to try and sort out some of the other problems that we've all got in these areas.
Right. Are we happy to move forward with this? Thank you. Right. Back to the agenda. I don't think there's much left. Next meeting, 28th of April. Urgent business, I have none. So I therefore close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance.